Well, I've got one thing going for me, at least. No matter what I do, there's no way this video can be any more boring than Rent-A-Girlfriend.
Oh, hi! Didn't see you there. I hit record early, didn't I? Hello, everyone. I'm Hedgehog, and welcome back to this nonsense. Welp, I guess I don't have to bother building up to it now. Then again, you've all seen the title of this video, which outright implies that I did not enjoy watching Rent-A-Girlfriend. But frankly, I'm actually really disappointed. I first thought of making this video after watching Mother's Basement rant about this show for a good 40 minutes, and I'm not gonna lie, he made it seem like a hysterically bad piss your pants laughing at the Moe Blob anime kind of situation. And it's not. There are parts of Rent-A-Girlfriend that are, heaven forbid, downright competent. So, why am I making this video? Simply put, Rent-A-Girlfriend is boring. Like, really, really boring. And the saddest part is that it was so easy for it not to be. So, what do I mean by that? Well, I'm going to spend a vast majority of this video trying to explain, so let's pace ourselves and figure out what's even going on here for all the newcomers. Today, we're going to fix Rent-A-Girlfriend. And I fully understand that fix is a really loaded word. I know. I chose it to court the fanboys to bombard my comments and get me those sweet, sweet algorithm points. For the rest of you who will actually pay attention to this video and not just nitpick everything I say and miss the point entirely, by fix, I mean fiddle with. And I'm allowed to do that, by the way. I've got a fucking BA in English. There's a piece of paper somewhere in my house that says, I know what I'm fucking talking about. Those words, exactly. To anyone who's actually been to college, however, you all know that all I did was pay a bunch of money I don't have to get that paper, so if you want to really check my qualifications, feel free to follow that link on the top right to a playlist of almost every single story I've written in the last 4 years. Also, if you end up liking it, you can maybe subscribe, both there and here, and maybe go look at my Patreon. Please, my editor is starving. As a writer, I know for a fact that there is never one way to fix something. Fiction is a nebulous, highly subjective thing, and anyone who tries to tell you that you can never do something in writing is wrong. However, by taking a look at individual stories on a case-by-case basis, you can kind of find some things that could have made it better. This is just one version of that. So, no, I'm not claiming that I have the one true method to make Rent-A-Girlfriend great again. Ultimately, this is just how I, one particular writer, would have written it. So, you can really take everything I say here with a grain of salt. Maybe you'll even think of some different methods than I brought up. I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Before we begin, however, we need to get a couple of things straight. Some notices and some rules. Please keep in mind that this analysis is going to be a lot less polished than the Sword Art Online one that came before it, mostly because at the time of recording, I have only seen Rent-A-Girlfriend once. I have only watched the first season, and I have not read any of the manga. This analysis will be taking the first 12 episodes of Rent-A-Girlfriend as if they were an island unto themselves. There are going to be several times throughout this video where I mention something like, this thing wasn't explained very well, or I don't get this character's motivation, and I'm sure that it's covered later in the manga. I know this already, so if any of you fuckers take precious time out of your day to inform me of that, I swear to God that I will find out where you live. I will creep into your house at 3 a.m., slither around your bedroom floor, and gently remove the covers from your feetsies. I will then proceed to jam 5 needles in between each of your little toesy-woesies. Got it? Good! Second, some rules for myself. In fixing this series, I can't stray too far away from the original plotline, mostly because there's a thin line between fixing an anime and just writing your own anime. Also because I really need to use the footage from the show as much as possible to cut down on my editing time. I also have to keep it a harem. I made this rule specifically because destroying that harem was one of the first intrusive thoughts that popped into my brain when considering all this. I already did that with Sword Art Online, and I got away with it there because SAO was a story that merely contained a semblance of a harem. Rent-A-Girlfriend is a harem anime. That's kind of the point of it, and to demolish that would be to fundamentally change the story, and that's not my purpose here. It pains me, but the harem must stay. Finally, beyond a mild interest in preserving pacing, I'm not really going to concern myself with the lengths of episodes. A lot of the time, odd pacing occurs in anime because the amount of time each episode has is very strict. I'm not an anime maker, I'm a storyteller, so we're mostly going to disregard how much I'm adding or subtracting from each episode and just kind of assume that it would all work out in the end. So with all that out of the way, I think it's time to return to my central thesis. Rent-A-Girlfriend is really boring. I'm going to spend most of this video giving you examples and showing how much better it could have been, but allow me, in brief, to explain why I think this. At its core, Rent-A-Girlfriend is a story about a college kid who gets involved with a girl who works for a rental girlfriend dating service, and the lies they get caught up in when he accidentally introduces her to his friends and family as his real girlfriend. The way I see it, a story with this setup can take two different directions. The first is to emphasize just how silly this plotline is and how shitty most of the main characters are as people, and create an absurdist comedy filled with the wacky situations these dumbasses find themselves in. The second is to emphasize the psychology behind this plotline and create a deep romantic drama. Rent-A-Girlfriend doesn't do either of these things. Instead, it saw the two largely different audiences these genres would attract, wanted them all, and tried to do both of these things at once. This is a problem with a lot of modern media, which tries to appeal simultaneously to as large of an audience as it possibly can. The problem is that in trying so hard to be both a wacky comedy and a heart-filled romance, Rent-A-Girlfriend really succeeds at neither. The characters aren't asshole-ish enough to really be funny, but all of the comedy moments water down the sappy ones so they can read as shallow rather than meaningful. A lot of what I'm going to be doing today is shrinking Rent-A-Girlfriend's audience down to a tighter but stronger core. A story that knows what it wants to be and really goes for it is always going to be better than a story that doesn't. Obviously then, there's two directions we could go from here. We could lean into the more serious side of the story, strengthen the character goals and motivations, and really go deep into analyzing them, or we could just throw our hands up in the air, say fuck it, and turn every single character into a raging piece of human garbage. I already did the former of these with SAO, so you know what? I'm feeling goofy. Let's make these fuckers absolutely unbearable. Of course, like fiction, comedy is very subjective. What I think is funny, you are probably going to not at all because I am very strange. But I'm going to march forward with the bold assumption that everyone has my exact brand of humor and keep my tears on the inside. With the central tenet in mind about the kind of story we want Rent-A-Girlfriend to be, let's hop feet first into the shit pile and start digging. I always find myself talking for way too long about the first episode of an anime than any other. Maybe it's because my mind is fresh so I can find the most things wrong with it, I don't know, but most likely it's because the first episode is the most important in any story. It's here where you introduce your characters, premise, and setting, and there's a lot of ways that can go wrong. That being said, Rent-A-Girlfriend starts in the most boring way possible, setting a trend. These first few moments of Rent-A-Girlfriend start with our main character, Kazuya, introducing himself to the camera. Listen, I get why this happens in manga. You've only got like 5 pages to sell your entire story, and those word bubbles are just so goddamn convenient. Still, it doesn't objectively make it any less shitty. Sure, I guess it gets the information you want across, his name, his age, the fact that he's got a girlfriend, but we don't really know anything else about him. We don't know what his personality is like, we don't know what his hobbies are, we don't even know what his major in college is. We never learn what his major in college is. Now, I'm not saying that we need to know all of these things right away, but we need to get some indication beyond the fact that he's supposed to be a #relatable self-insert for every horny weeb on the planet. Within the first minute of the anime, Kazuya introduces himself, is dumped, and has a temper tantrum in his room. After the shitty initial introduction, we are finally starting to get some indication that this man's is a total dweebus. He then, somehow, knows about the rental girlfriend service that Chizuru, whom we'll meet in a moment, works for, and requests her for a date. We then cut to him meeting up with the girlfriend and watch as he mutters under his breath how he bets the girl's fugly without all the filters. Quote. Chizuru, of course, turns out to be a major hottie, and they head to the cafe. Alright, here's where we start fixing shit. The reason that I summarize so much of the beginning before touching it is because I'd like to take this entire intro as a whole. First of all, I think it gives a sort of false impression of the rest of the show. This opening is frenetic, energetic. A lot happens really quickly, and there's at least 3 jokes in that time period. The joke-to-time ratio of this anime will never be this high again. There's nothing necessarily wrong with a beginning like this, but I think some of the jokes would land better if given a better base to stand on. So, writing tip number 1. 9 times out of 10, it's way more effective to introduce your characters to the audience diegetically. This means within the scope of the world itself. Seeing how a character interacts with their world and other people is going to be a lot more effective than having him monologue to the audience, so we're going to reframe these first few minutes of the show entirely. Instead of initially telling the story leading up to the date, we're going to start on the date itself, specifically in the cafe. Chizuru will be putting on her lovely, sweet girlfriend act, which will leave us entirely unprepared to see her true personality later on. This scene is all about establishing Kazuya, anyway. If you want to build into this scene a little bit, you could even keep a little of the original narration. Something like, "My name is Kazuya Kinoshita, and right now I'm on a date with an incredibly cute girl." Like in the real scene, he acts all embarrassed being in Chizuru's presence, and to open him up, she starts asking him questions about himself. This would lead into a flashback about the rest of the intro. His cute girlfriend, we'll get to her later, oh ho ho ho, trust me, getting dumped and feeling down in the dumps about it. We need to add a little something to indicate how he found out about the rental girlfriend app, but since we're already in flashback mode, this can be done pretty easily. It just needs a random throwaway line about how an acquaintance told him about it, or he found a poster while walking home after his girlfriend dumped him. Something like that. Back to the original show, they then go on their date. They head to the aquarium, and Kazuya tells her about the fish. This will be the only thing we ever learn about him. Then they walk back to the subway, and Chizuru holds his hand, and he instantly falls in love. This all leads to a punchline where he gets butthurt that all these other guys online got the exact same experience from Chizuru that he did, and that it was all an act, which, yes, of course it was. Idiot. But I like this bit. The date portion is strong. The sappy romantic moments work very well off of Kazuya being a little bitch like 5 seconds later. He then sends her a 1-star review complaining that she didn't know her fish trivia. I wish a second longer was placed on this moment, something like, Kazuya struggles for a good couple of seconds to find anything wrong with her, and then goes, The fish! The fish! She didn't know anything about the fish! Because at this moment, this doesn't play out like the punchline it should, it just seems mean-spirited. By the way, going forward, you're going to find me doing this a lot. Oh boy. Kazuya gets a flashback about his dad talking about his living expenses, and though this needs to be mentioned at some point, we're going to move it to a bit later because it kind of muddles the mood. Keep on Kazuya, keep watching him be a butthurt baby man, and then watch him request Chizuru for a second date just to get mad at her. The first half of this date is where the mood starts to be ruined. Kazuya essentially angsts at this girl for their relationship not being real, and it's played entirely straight, at least as far as I'm aware. Can you see what I mean, a little? The fact that the story is already ping-ponging back and forth between comedy and seriousness with little to no pause. For our absurdist comedy take, we need to keep the mood flowing so that the next punchline lands properly, so we're going to skip this entire first half of the date and go right from when they meet up to the aquarium. They go back to the aquarium from the last date, and it turns out that Chizuru literally read up on fish facts before coming. What a legend. This is the moment that Kazuya breaks, gets all butthurt again to her face, in public. It's not a good look. Chizuru drags him away, and then in an abandoned part of the aquarium seems to lay into him. It works as a punchline, this difference between real Chizuru and girlfriend Chizuru, as we'll start referring to her as, but we're gonna make it hit a little more. Instead of just shifting right into her real personality, we're going to have her start in girlfriend mode. Something like, Kazuya, why would you say something like that? And then, the instant his heart starts to melt, she'll continue. Do you know how big of an idiot you are? We want to make the difference between her girlfriend persona and her real persona as big as possible, at least in this scene. In order to turn Chizuru into more of a caricature, we're going to emphasize how seriously she takes excelling at being a girlfriend. We're going to give her a significantly inflated ego, so the majority of her railing will involve grilling him about why he gave her a 1-star review. The show already does this to an extent, but we just want to make it more apparent that this is going to be a big part of her character. This will help sell the idea that this show is full of assholes, because now we don't have one annoying fucker to deal with, but 2. Despite all of that, Chizuru is still willing to continue the date, but Kazuya gets a call from his family. It turns out that his grandmother had an accident and is now being hospitalized. He runs, and for some reason, Chizuru follows him, saying that he's still got time left. I don't know, it just doesn't make sense to me why she follows him. We're never told about any obligation she has to spend the whole date time with him if it goes badly, and in fact, she just spoke as if he didn't have to stay. We don't need more to make this work. All we're gonna do is give Kazuya more of a sad puppy dog expression when he first mentions his grandma, and once he runs, have Chizuru roll her eyes and go, oh god, better follow him or he'll give me another shitty review. They meet his grandma, and his whole family takes the piss out of him by saying that Chizuru couldn't possibly be his girlfriend because this is Kazuya we're talking about. Again, we're going to play this up a little more so that when Kazuya spits out that she is his girlfriend, it's clear that it's because he was spurred on by his family. They freak out once they know, especially his grandma, mostly because he brought a girl home with a... Also, this face Kazuya makes here is how I feel most of the time. There's this just meme-worthy, just dead-eyed face. I think it was made into a meme, if I remember correctly. He's got really tiny eyes and a really big face. For once, he is actually relatable. Kazuya's parents leave and tell him and Chizuru to watch Granny, who literally just comes out and asks if they've fucked yet. Fucking based grandma over here. Actually, this is one thing that I do like about this show. As I've mentioned in the past, anime tends to be really Puritan about the whole sex thing. Rent-a-Girlfriend is not, and I actually appreciate that they just let the characters speak about sex. 1 gold star among your 50 demerits. Anyway, Granny runs off to tell all of her hospital friends about Kazuya's new girlfriend, and Chizuru freaks out because, as it turns out, her grandma is hospitalized here at the moment as well, and she doesn't know about the rental girlfriend job. So we cut to Kazuya and Chizuru running for their lives. Maybe I'm weird, but the horror sound effect they use reminds me of a zombie chase, so I think it'd be really funny to have these two cornered in a vacant room, and from their perspective it's like they're hiding from the evil dead, but then we just cut to the grannies and they're just walking down the hall normally. The two get cornered and have to hide under the covers of a bed. Kazuya on top of Chizuru, and he gets a hard-on and Chizuru tells him to stop it. Like he has any control over it at all. Good joke. Well done. Wish the rest of the show was like this. If you're gonna do raunchy comedy, just do raunchy comedy, you know? Grow a pair. The grannies leave, but it turns out that Chizuru's grandma wasn't with them because she's a little late and runs into them after they've gotten off the bed. And it gets worse. So now both of their families think they're dating for real because Kazuya doesn't want to hurt his grandma and Chizuru wants to keep her secret. And that's the main setup for the show. Decently well executed, I think. Problem is that at the last second, after an episode full of humor and goofiness, the ending suddenly gets really serious and heartfelt for no reason. No, show, you can't do this. You haven't earned it yet. It feels meaningless and hollow because we still don't know a lot about these characters. Kazuya talks about why he chose to use a rental service, and they philosophize about rental girlfriends for a second. Some of this exposition needs to stay so that Chizuru knows about his ex, but we don't need the philosophizing yet. We need one last good punchline. The problem is that I'm not actually a comedian. I've been kind of faking it up till now, so I'm gonna leave that up to the experts. My note in the script says, insert joke here. Chapter 2 is split pretty neatly in half. Clearly, it's 2 manga chapters shoved together into one episode, so we're going to tackle the first half all together and then the second. Ready? Here we go. This episode starts with Kazuya and Chizuru finding out that not only do they go to the same college, though Chizuru wears a disguise so that people don't recognize her as Chizuru Mizuhara, rental girlfriend extraordinaire, but they also live right next to each other in the same apartment complex. How they didn't somehow run into each other on the way to one of their 2 dates is a complete mystery to me. Also, this is the silliest fucking harem plot. The only thing that would be sillier is if the rest of the girls lived/moved into the same apartment complex as well. Wait. They don't do that, do they? Okay. Whew. Looks like we're safe. For now. But again, comedy can get away with a lot. As we'll soon see, it's a really common occurrence throughout the anime that Kazuya and Chizuru keep running into each other. Seriously, like, it happens like every other episode. In the original, it's not really clear if this is supposed to be a gag or if the writer really couldn't think of any other way for the plot to continue. In our version, it's definitely going to be a joke, with them getting more and more upset about running into each other each time. This time, the one at the apartment complex, the second time this happens, we'll just give Chizuru a little freak out. Are you serious? You? Here? And each successive time, they'll both act more defeated by fate. Anyway, at the end of the last episode, the two plan to tell their families that they broke up. But Kazuya gets a call from his grandma saying that she's going to come visit him at his apartment and that Chizuru better be there. I also think it's funny that she calls her Chizuru Hime, which is basically like addressing her as Princess Chizuru. Unfortunately, rental girlfriends need to be booked a week in advance, and Granny is coming over now. So Kazuya knocks on Chizuru's door and begs her to make an appearance, which she refuses. In the original, because she thinks he needs to not put off lying, but in our version, because that would be breaking the rules, and she can't besmirch her girlfriend rep like that. Granny comes over, and upon realizing that Chizuru isn't there, Kazuya gets very close to telling her that he and Chizuru broke up, only after trying to call her and then running over to her place and begging her to come over. It's pretty funny. Good joke. Granny then realizes that they broke up, but thinks it's because she was sick of Kazuya's shit already. Lamau. Chizuru hears their conversation from their joined balcony and ultimately has a change of heart, appearing at the doorway, seemingly to make up with Kazuya by bringing him and Granny food. In the original show, though she begins the first episode as very tsundere, it is very quickly revealed that Chizuru is actually a big softie and is one of the nicest people Kazuya knows. As someone who began her internet career essentially as an anime waifu, I can tell you that she would not stay nice for very long. She, of course, does need to eventually warm up to Kazuya, and this episode should absolutely be the start of that, but I want her throughout the series to do things for him a lot more begrudgingly, more because he's a sad, pathetic man-baby whom she feels sorry for than any sense of it being the right thing to do. So, that being said, we're going to make her much more upset after Granny leaves, at least just a little. I want her to kind of confront Kazuya. You're never going to really tell your grandma the truth, are you? He holds out the money to rent her next week as a way of confirming this for her, and she swipes it from him. Next Wednesday? Fine. It's a date. Cut to commercial. And then Kazuya jerks it to the thought of his ex. I'm not going to change it because in our context it serves to emphasize how much of a horny loser he is, but just... After this is where we properly meet his ex, Mommy. He runs into her at his school with his friends and they comment on how bangable she is. From what we're aware of, she seems like a genuinely nice girl, and I wonder why she... Oh, I see. She is a bitch. We know that because her eyes have no definition to them all of a sudden. Oh god, oh fuck, she's got Hinamizawa syndrome. I actually think that it'd be far better to not drop this reveal so early. There's a good moment later on that we can expand upon to make that the reveal, but it'll work much better as a story reveal if we as the audience get to know her as a nice girl and then feel betrayed when it turns out she's a blah blah huge bitch. Never underestimate how effective it can be to make your audience feel the same way as your characters. It really helps them relate to the story and get invested in the plot. We still need to establish what she thinks of the situation here though, so instead of just cutting this scene, once her friends mention that her ex is still totally into her, we'll just have her turn and say sweetly, "Oh, really?" Anyway, we cut to Chizuru and Kazuya on another date, but oh shit, then his friends run into the two of them together. Luckily, it seems like they don't recognize her from school, but Kazuya, like the little bitch he is, still tells them that she's his real girlfriend. There's a brief moment where he brags about her, and we're going to, again, lengthen this just a little bit to drive home that now Kazuya is getting something out of this. The two friends ask them out for a drinking session. Remember, Americans, Japan's drinking age is 20, not 21. And though Chizuru shakes her head vigorously, he still accepts. Again, this moment is funny, but can be funnier. We're going to add a little internal dialogue to help out. Chizuru, while shaking her head, should be thinking something like, "Don't you dare." And Kazuya will probably think something like, "But I could show off my totally cute girlfriend more. All the other guys will be so jealous." And then insane villain laugh. Maybe add a cute chibi visual of a bunch of guys bowing before him or something like that. Honestly, I don't have a whole ton of problems with the rest of this episode. What I've said so far in general applies. Make the comedy moments longer and more dramatic and decrease the sappy moments. At least for the time being, so I'm just going to quickly run through what happens. They make it to the drinking establishment, but it turns out that Mommy is also there. Kazuya's friends apologize as they had no idea she was going to be there. They sit down, everything's awkward for a few minutes, and then Mommy promptly tries to make Chizuru uncomfortable by talking about Kazuya's crazy libido. Then Chizuru yells at her and leaves. Mommy then goes completely back to normal and orders more beer. This should be the first moment that we might get some inkling that she's maybe not the nice girl we know. Later on, Kazuya ends up kinda drunk, and as he makes his way home, runs into Mommy. They walk home together, and there's some inclination that Mommy might be willing to get back together. Yes, the tortured web of drama weaves itself more tightly together. This whole second half of episode 2 is set up for episode 3, so why wait any longer? The third episode is where this whole Mommy Chizuru dynamic comes to a head, but first we have to finish the scene from the last episode. Mommy tries to invite Kazuya home with her, but it turns out her little brother's got his friends over. Then, instead of asking her over to his place like he wants to, Kazuya books it and barfs in a corner. He finally gets up the courage to ask her over, but man, looks like we gotta watch the theme song first. Drat. Oh, wait, this is an analysis video. We don't need to watch the OP. Anyway, Kazuya fucks up and starts rambling, and Mommy kind of blows him off. I was considering having a small indication of Mommy being up to no good again, but ultimately we still want to put the burden of assholishness onto Kazuya. In the original, we already know that Mommy's up to no good, so Kazuya's little drunken self-put-down makes us just go, no, you're not pathetic, she's just toying with you. When instead it is a genuine moment of self-reflection for him, and the first real one we're going to let him have in our version. Mommy derides him a little, thinking that Chizuru is uptight and that he's dating her solely on looks, and Kazuya finally defends her. Mommy again makes him look like the asshole and he runs away, and here's where we'll maintain that subtle shot of Mommy pursing her lips from the original. Except now, since in our version we don't know that she's a total bitch, it's just a weird little moment instead of a raise our fist to the sky cursing her name sort of affair. Currently, we should be feeling a sense of confusion about Mommy's intentions and true personality, because when we lack the context, it seems like her personality is all over the place. Which is good. This will make all of our actions click into place when we drop the reveal later, and give the last 2 episodes at least a little replay value. Also, can I just say that Mommy is the only good character in the show? No, I'm not gonna explain myself. Fuck you. Anyway, Kazuya walks back, and by his narration we can tell that he's already in love with Chizuru. No! You fucks! It's too early! We need some build up for these things! Instead, he's gonna walk back and say, why did I stand up for Mizuhara? Isn't Mommy the one I really want? This is all so confusing. Well, at the very least, I should go apologize. Obviously, don't say it like that. Say it better than that, but that's the gist. They run into each other on the landing outside of their apartments, and Kazuya has a big breakdown where he cries and apologizes, calling himself pathetic. He gets a pass this time because it's clear he's pretty drunk. But then Chizuru gives him this whole dramatic pep talk, and dude, we're only 5 minutes into this episode, yeah? I know I sound like a broken record by this point, but holy shit, this show is kind of preachy. And don't worry, I'm not going to cut every single one of these scenes, but I'm being especially harsh in the first half because I feel like it hasn't really earned the sappiness yet. So for now, Chizuru is going to sigh, tell him he's not pathetic and to get a grip, and then pull him into his apartment to let him sleep it off. Instead of a big dramatic moment 5 minutes into the episode, we have a quiet development between the two. This is the first time Chizuru, in our version at least, has ever said something positive about Kazuya, and I'd like to let that sit. We cut to an undisclosed time later, and Kazuya is on his way to the beach with some friends for summer break. It's a really weird transition, and I understand that it's a symptom of adapting manga chapters. I'd recommend moving everything we just saw to the end of the previous episode and start this episode here, but that might make the pacing a little funky, so I'm not entirely sure. Kazuya is at first wondering if Mommy even wants him here on this trip since she's going too, but his buddy tells him that apparently she's the one who wanted him and his new girlfriend to come. Alas, Chizuru isn't here because in reality the trip was on such short notice and to pay her for a whole weekend would be unrealistic. This might be the moment where you bring up the idea of expenses that we cut from the last episode. They make it to the town where they will be staying, and Kazuya hypes himself up to finally get back with Mommy on this trip. Meanwhile, Mommy is, yikes. Okay, yeah, we're gonna come back to the scene in a minute because, spoilers, this is going to be how we reveal Mommy's true intentions, but I think it needs to come at a more dramatic moment, so we're gonna place it a little bit later in the episode. In the meantime, let's have a poll among ourselves. Do you think that when they get to the beach, Kazuya will A. Run into Chizuru, B. Run into Chizuru, or C. Run into Chizuru? Guess what? There she is! I didn't comment on this earlier, but I also wish that in her disguise they'd made her a little frumpier, because even with her hair up and the glasses, Chizuru is still a solid 9. The joke is supposed to be that somehow no one else recognizes her, but it is this writer's opinion that the creative team should grow some balls and allow her to briefly look somewhat less than perfect. Kazuya and Mommy have a brief conversation where Mommy apologizes for her behavior the other day, and Kazuya takes that to mean that she was also worrying about it. Then she, of course, with perfect timing, starts reminiscing about the month they dated. She gets all sad about it, and Kazuya almost tells her the truth about him and his rental girlfriend, but then, enter Chizuru! One of her friends ends up kicking their ball over to Kazuya's group, and the kids all recognize each other. It's like that one Spider-Man meme. They talk briefly, there's a moment they think that one of Kazuya's friends might have recognized her, but it turns out to be a dumb joke. Chizuru leaves, and Mommy asks Kazuya what he was just about to say. Like the absolute dipshit he is, he immediately backs down and makes a bunch of excuses. They are interrupted again as Kazuya and the gang do rock, paper, scissors to see who goes to get snacks and shit, and of course, Kazuya loses. At the Tamly Mart, he goes and mopes in the bathroom. Of course, because why wouldn't she? Chizuru ends up being in the store too and also needs to use the bathroom. She walks in on him because why would Kazuya, lock the door? Don't be ridiculous, and he pulls her inside. They have a small conversation, bickering at each other about why they're both here, but oh no, it turns out that Mommy has followed him and hears him talking to someone in the bathroom. The last thing he wants is for Mommy to think he's hitting up some girl while she's around, and a whole comedy of errors ensues that ultimately leads to Chizuru donning her girlfriend disguise once again. So now she's gotta hang out with Kazuya's group for a little while. Great. Okay, so you might be noticing a trend this episode of Mommy going off and typing on her phone. Allow me to finally explain that. There are originally 2 of them, but we're going to combine them into one and make it longer because both of them are too short. So short that you can barely even read what she's typing. And since this is going to be our grand reveal scene, this is also going to be where we end the episode. Mommy says she has to take a phone call, and we follow her as she goes around the corner. She boots up her private Twitter, and we see her shoulders shaking. Is she going to cry? She begins typing. I can't believe he actually brought his girlfriend on this trip. Oh no, she's going to cry. How pathetic. What? We pull back, and it turns out Mommy isn't crying, but shaking with silent laughter. She continues typing. I'm still pissed that he stood up to me for her. How cringe. Her expression hardens, and we truly see now how much of an evil bitch she is. I'll make them break up, for sure.